They said they didn't have children, but 30 years ago they gave one away. Margaret Collins lay in that hospital bed, her 68-year-old body failing her, while David sat beside her clutching her hand with fingers that shook from more than just age. The antiseptic smell couldn't mask the regret that hung heavy in room. When the door opened, their nurse walked in, professional, confident, with kind eyes that seemed to see straight through to your soul. Sarah Williams was 30 years old, beautiful, and completely unaware she was looking at the two people who had abandoned her as a 3-day-old baby. "Good morning, Mrs. Collins," Sarah said, checking Margaret's chart with gentle efficiency. "How are we feeling today?" Margaret's voice came out weak and tired. So very tired. There was something about Sarah that made David stare. The shape of her nose, maybe. The way she tilted her head when she concentrated. Something familiar in a way that made his chest ache. "Have we met before?" he asked. Sarah smiled. "I don't think so, Mr. Collins. I'd remember." She wouldn't remember. She was only 3 days old when they signed those papers. When David reached for his water glass with trembling hands, Sarah steadied his grip without even being asked. "The hands tell the story, don't they?" she said softly. "All the years they've carried us." David's eyes filled with tears. Margaret turned away, unable to look at the daughter she'd given up caring for the father who'd helped make that impossible choice. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah became their constant. She checked vitals, adjusted pillows, and brought Margaret extra blankets without being asked. Her presence filled that sterile room with a warmth neither David nor Margaret had felt in decades. One afternoon, as Margaret lay listless against her pillows, Sarah asked, "My adoptive mother used to read to me when I was sick. Would you like me to read to you?" Margaret's eyes snapped open. "You were adopted?" "As a baby," Sarah said simply. "Never knew my birth parents." Margaret's breathing caught in her throat. "But I was lucky," Sarah continued, unaware of the bomb she'd just dropped. "My parents, my real parents, they gave me everything. Love, education, opportunity. I became a nurse because of them." David's voice came out strained. "Do you ever wonder about the ones who gave you up?" Sarah paused, her hand still on Margaret's pulse. "Sometimes. I imagine they were young, scared. Maybe they thought they were doing the right thing." The room fell silent, except for the steady beep of monitors. "I hope they're happy," Sarah whispered. "I hope they know I turned out okay." That's when Margaret began to cry. Soft, broken sobs that seemed to come from 30 years of buried pain. "Mrs. Collins, what's wrong?" Sarah asked, genuine concern in her voice. "Are you in pain?" "Yes," Margaret whispered, "but not the kind you can heal." That night, David couldn't sleep. He sat in the chair beside Margaret's bed, staring at Sarah's handwriting on the medical chart. Clean, careful letters, the same way Margaret used to write before arthritis stole the grace from her fingers. "She has your hands," he whispered to his sleeping wife. In the hallway, Sarah organized files when her supervisor approached with a puzzled expression. "The Collins family has been asking specifically for you," Linda said. "Every shift." "They're sweet people," Sarah replied. "Lost, but sweet. Just be careful. Sometimes patients get too attached." Sarah nodded, but her eyes drifted back to room 237. Something about them felt familiar, like a song she once knew but couldn't quite remember. The next morning, Sarah found David crying in the bathroom. "Mr. Collins," she called softly. "I'm sorry," he said, wiping his eyes. "This is harder than I thought it would be." "What is?" David looked at her, really looked, seeing the baby they'd held for 3 precious days before, signing her away forever. Watching someone so good take care of us, he said. When we don't deserve it. Everyone deserves care, Mr. Collins. Even people who've made terrible mistakes. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. Especially them. Margaret's condition worsened overnight. Sarah worked double shifts, refusing to let anyone else take over their care. She held Margaret's hand through the fever and spoke softly when the delirium came. "I'm sorry, baby," Margaret mumbled in her fevered state. "Mama's so sorry." "Shh. It's okay," Sarah whispered, stroking her hair. "You're okay." "She was perfect," Margaret continued, lost in memory. 3 days old and perfect. Sarah's hand stilled. Brown eyes, like her father's. But my nose, my stubborn little nose. Without thinking, Sarah touched her own nose. "We were so young, so scared." Margaret's voice broke. "We thought she'd be better without us." The room grew quiet, except for the sound of Sarah's world shifting on its axis. "What was her birthday?" Sarah whispered. "March 15th, Sarah's birthday." The date she'd celebrated for 30 years, never knowing it was also the date her birth parents' hearts had broken in two. With shaking hands, Sarah pulled out her hospital ID badge. March 15th, 1994. The date stared back at her like an accusation. That's when David walked in and saw Sarah's face, saw the recognition, the shock, the impossible truth written in her expression. "Oh God," he breathed. "You know." Sarah couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. "We looked for you," David said, his voice cracking. "For years we tried to find you, but the adoption was closed, and they said it was better if we didn't interfere." Sarah stood up, backing toward the door. "I need some air." "Please don't go," Margaret's weak voice stopped her at the threshold. "Please don't leave us again." Sarah stood frozen, her back to them. "I've been taking care of you for weeks," she said finally. "You didn't know," David started. "But some part of me did." Sarah turned around, tears streaming down her face. "Some part of me felt connected, like I was supposed to be here." They all cried then. 30 years of separation, guilt, and love flooding the small hospital room. "You gave me away," Sarah said. "Yes," Margaret whispered. "And I came back." "Yes, to take care of you." A long pause stretched between them, filled with everything they'd lost and found. Sarah walked slowly back to Margaret's bedside. "I used to imagine what I'd say if I ever met you. I had speeches planned. Angry words." She took Margaret's hand in hers. "But watching you these past weeks, seeing how you hold each other, how you've loved each other all these years, I think I understand." "We were children ourselves," Margaret said. "I know. And you gave me to parents who were ready, who could give me everything I needed. Did you have a good life?" David asked, his voice barely audible. Sarah smiled through her tears. "The best. They taught me to help people, to heal, to love unconditionally." She squeezed Margaret's hand. "They taught me that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go." Margaret's eyes filled with wonder. "And you became a nurse." "I became someone who takes care of people who need it most," Sarah said. "Even when they think they don't deserve it." 3 days later, Margaret was strong enough to sit up. Sarah had arranged for a window table in the hospital cafeteria. The three of them sat together, sharing coffee and tentative conversation. "What happens now?" David asked. Sarah looked out the window at the world beyond, the same world that had somehow brought them back together after 30 years. "Now we have a choice," she said. "We can let the past define us, or we can write a new story." Margaret reached across the table and touched Sarah's face. The first time she touched her daughter since she was 3 days old. I see so much of both of us in you, she whispered. But mostly I see someone we could never have raised you to become. Someone better. Sarah covered Margaret's hand with her own. I see two people who made an impossible choice out of love. And I see two people I'm honored to know. As the sun set through the hospital windows, casting golden light across their small table, Sarah looked at her birth parents and felt something she'd never expected to feel. Complete. Home, she whispered.